A cold wind howled through the narrow alleys of the city as Aryan pulled his jacket tighter around him. His hands trembled, not from the chill, but from the weight of his thoughts. He sat hunched on a park bench, his head buried in his palms, his breath misting in the frosty air. For months now, his life had felt like a sinking ship. Debts piled up, relationships crumbled, career dreams shattered. Every day was a battle against regret of missed opportunities, wrong decisions, and words he wished he hadn't said. "I can't take it anymore," Aryan whispered to himself, his voice breaking. He had come dangerously close to giving up, convinced that life had dealt him an unfair hand. But as he sat there, lost in despair, a faint shuffle nearby caught his attention. Looking up, he saw an elderly man sitting crossed-legged on the pavement across the road. His clothes were threadbare, barely enough to shield him from the biting cold. A thin, frayed blanket covered his shoulders, but his cracked lips and trembling hands betrayed his struggle. Next to him sat a small tin can with a few coins clinking inside. Aryan's stomach churned. He watched as the man bowed his head slightly whenever someone dropped a coin, his dignity shrinking further with each passing hour. Suddenly, Aryan's problems felt smaller, but he brushed the thought aside. At least, he is probably used to this, Aryan muttered defensively. I wasn't built for this kind of suffering. But fate had more lessons in store. As Aryan walked farther down the street, he stopped abruptly at the sight of a young boy, no older than 12, sitting on the pavement with a white cane beside him. The boy's cloudy eyes stared blankly at the void. In front of him was a pile of books. A handwritten sign read, "Trying to finish school. Please help." Aryan's throat tightened. The boy was tracing letters with his fingers, slowly memorizing them. Despite his disability, the boy's focus was unshaken. "Excuse me," Aryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What are you studying?" The boy tilted his head toward Aryan and smiled. "Mathematics. I am preparing for my exams. I want to be a teacher someday." Aryan was stunned. A boy who had never seen the world wanted to educate others about it. Yet here he was, a grown man with his eyesight intact, drowning in self-pity. Aryan forced a smile and slipped some money into the boy's tin before walking away, his heart pounding. But the city wasn't done showing him the raw side of life. Just around the corner, Aryan spotted a woman selling handmade crafts on the roadside. What stopped him in his tracks, however, was that she had no limbs. She balanced a brush in her mouth, painting intricate designs on clay pots with astounding precision. Aryan stood frozen. The woman noticed him staring and smiled warmly. "Want to buy one?" she asked, setting down the brush with her lips. Aryan knelt to get a closer look, his voice trembling. How do you do this?" The woman shrugged. Well, we all have to survive. It's not easy, but I make it work. Aryan could not hold it any longer. Tears welled in his eyes. He pulled out his wallet and bought 2 pots, but the woman stopped him as he tried to pay more. Don't pity me, she said gently. I don't need charity. I just need work. Aryan nodded, ashamed of his own weaknesses. He walked back to the park, his steps heavy, but his heart lighter. Each person he had met carried burdens far heavier than his own, yet none of them had given up. That night, Aryan lay in bed, replaying every interaction in his mind. For months, he had cursed his struggles, blamed his circumstances, and pitied himself. But today, he saw what real struggle looked like, and more importantly, he saw what resilience looked like. The old man who begged in the cold still bowed in gratitude. The blind boy who couldn't see the world was determined to shape it. The woman with no limbs didn't wait for help. She built her life, brush stroke by brush stroke. Aryan rose from bed and stood by the window, gazing at the city lights. His problems hadn't disappeared. His debts were still unpaid, and his dreams were still distant. But for the first time in months, Aryan wasn't afraid to face them. He wiped his tears and whispered to himself, if they can keep going, so can I. You see, we often drown in our struggles, believing our pain is the worst. But life has a way of showing us that others are fighting far harder battles with far fewer resources, and yet they keep going. This story reminds us to be grateful for what we have, to rise above regret, and to face challenges with courage. My dear friends, no matter how heavy the burden is, just keep going, because resilience is stronger than despair. This is Sunshine Stories. Thank you so much for joining, and stay blessed.